Otis Thorpe, Sam Cassell. They beating Jordan and Pippen and them in the finals back to back.
Whoa! I don't know that.
I believe. Okay,
I don't know that. That's speculative.
None of us planet that would ever look at Jordan and say that. There's no one that would look at him and say he could never be a three-point shooter.
Stephen A. Smith begins by framing the conversation around the simple act of looking at Michael Jordan and comparing him to today's generation of players. This is a starting point that may seem basic, yet it opens up a profound discussion about perception and comparison across eras. When you examine Jordan in the context of the modern game, you are not only comparing numbers or awards, you are also analyzing how his skill set, mentality, and adaptability would translate in an environment that has changed dramatically in terms of athleticism, rules, and pace. By saying, when you look at him, you look at today's generation, Stephen A. is pointing out that Jordan is not an antique artifact locked in the 1990s, but a player whose physical and mental attributes would still demand recognition among the best today. This remark sets the stage for dismantling the idea that athletes from older generations cannot compete with modern training regimens and athletic standards. Instead, it emphasizes that certain talents transcend decades, and Jordan's work ethic, competitiveness, and instincts belong in any era's upper echelon. This also hints at the core of Stephen A.'s argument, which is not to diminish current stars, but to remind us that Jordan's greatness is timeless. His image is not just tied to nostalgia, it is tied to attributes that would stand up to and even surpass the demands of today's NBA environment.
Yeah. Jordan, when you look at him, you look at today's generation of players.
Stephen A. Smith then expands on this by acknowledging a reality that many older generation advocates sometimes avoid. The athletes of today are, in many ways, more physically gifted than ever. They are faster, more athletic, and in some cases, more refined in their shooting ability. This is not a concession of inferiority for Jordan's era, but a factual acknowledgement that sports science, nutrition, and training methods have evolved significantly. However, this acknowledgement sets the stage for his core point. Even with all these advancements, the gulf between being physically capable and being historically dominant is massive. The speed, athleticism, and improved shooting of modern players do not erase Jordan's competitive advantages, because his greatness was never built solely on athletic ability. He combined elite physical gifts with an unrelenting drive, unparalleled basketball IQ, and the mental resilience to dominate when it mattered most. By making this observation, Stephen A. draws a subtle line between skill and supremacy. The modern generation may have the tools, but Jordan had the complete package and the mental wiring to use those tools more effectively than anyone else. This framing is important because it directly addresses one of the most common counterarguments from modern-era advocates, that Jordan's success came in a less competitive or less athletic environment. Stephen A.'s statement turns that on its head by suggesting that even in this upgraded athletic landscape, Jordan's combination of traits would still make him the ultimate standard.
Away from the fact that today's generation of players look better than they've ever been. They're faster, they're more athletic, they clearly can shoot better to some degree, at least some of them rather.
The next point, Stephen A. Smith makes cuts directly into the myth that Jordan's offensive skill set was somehow limited by the era he played in. He emphasizes that no one who truly understands basketball would claim that Jordan could not have been a proficient three-point shooter. This statement does more than defend Jordan's versatility. It underlines the adaptability of great players to meet the demands of their environment. During Jordan's career, the game simply did not prioritize the three-point shot as it does today. The emphasis was on mid-range mastery, post play, and attacking the basket. Yet, if the modern game required a higher volume of threes, Jordan would have adapted his training, mechanics, and shot selection accordingly. Stephen A. is essentially reminding us that great players do not exist in a vacuum. They evolve to maximize their impact in any context. Just as today's stars like LeBron James or Stephen Curry adjust their games as they age or as team needs shift, Jordan would have integrated a three-point arsenal into his offensive toolkit if that was the dominant strategy of his era. This is a crucial argument in GOAT discussions because it challenges the flawed logic of freezing players in their historical context and assuming they could not adjust. Jordan's obsessive competitiveness and relentless work ethic make it almost certain that he would have met and possibly exceeded modern shooting expectations if the game demanded it. In other words, limitations of an era are not limitations of the player when the player in question is Michael Jordan.
Planet that would ever look at Jordan and say that. There's no one that would look at him and say he could never be a three-point shooter.
Stephen A. Smith makes a critical point by noting how the NBA had to change its own rules in direct response to Michael Jordan's dominance in isolation situations. This is not a casual statement. It reflects just how disruptive Jordan was to the game itself. When a player is so effective that the league must adapt structurally to slow him down, you are dealing with a force that transcends normal competition. Smith is pointing out that because Jordan could beat defenders one-on-one so consistently, it became necessary to impose regulations to prevent two defenders from occupying the same side of the court against him, which speaks volumes about the imbalance of talent he created. This was not a tweak to give others a chance. It was a necessary measure to prevent him from utterly dismantling opponents on a nightly basis. In today's game, we often see players exploit rules for spacing and defensive switches, but Jordan faced the opposite scenario. The rules were literally adjusted to make his life harder, not easier, yet he still thrived. This context matters when comparing eras. While LeBron James has also faced defensive strategies tailored to him, the NBA's broader shift in rules in Jordan's time was aimed at countering his exact offensive strengths. That fact underlines why Smith maintains that Jordan's impact was singular. Players today might be faster and have a more refined three-point arsenal, but they have the benefit of rules that encourage offensive freedom. Jordan had to operate in an environment where his very style of play was restricted, yet he still produced historic results. When evaluating greatness, you cannot ignore the fact that he achieved dominance despite obstacles engineered specifically to reduce it. That is why, in Smith's framing, Jordan's place above virtually all others remains untouchable.
Would look at him and say he could never, be a big guard and do what Kobe did. There's no one that would look at him and say he could never do what LeBron James did with the no hand check.
When Stephen A. Smith follows up by saying that Jordan in isolation would destroy people and rip souls, he is going beyond statistics and into the psychological warfare Jordan brought to the game. Isolation play is the purest form of basketball battle, one player against another with no help or system to hide behind. Jordan's mastery here was not simply about scoring, it was about breaking the opponent's will. The phrase "rip souls" captures what it felt like to guard him. You were not just getting beaten physically, you were being mentally dismantled, possession by possession. This is the part of Jordan's game that often goes underappreciated in modern comparisons. In an era without the constant switching and defensive schemes we see now, Jordan often took his man directly, forcing them to defend without help and punishing any weakness instantly. The defensive hand-checking rules, physical contact, and overall toughness of the league in the 80s and 90s meant that success in isolation was a brutal test. Yet Jordan thrived, often making elite defenders look ordinary. This is why Smith emphasizes this particular quality. It shows a level of dominance that transcended systems and schemes. Today's game, with its increased use of pick and rolls, spacing, and perimeter-heavy offense, allows players to avoid pure isolation battles when needed. Jordan embraced them, and his record in those scenarios was devastating. In a hypothetical head-to-head skill comparison with any other player, the ability to take someone one-on-one and crush them mentally and physically is a weapon few have possessed at his level. That is a defining reason Smith reinforces Jordan's supremacy.
Those rules were made to negate what Jordan brought to the table. Why? Because he was so dominant that you literally made it illegal to have two dudes on the same side on a wing offensively in order to deal with it. You had to deal with him.
Stephen A. Smith then introduces a fascinating anecdote from John Sally during the filming of The Last Dance. Sally revealed that the defensive strategy against Jordan was simple: get to him before he could leave the ground. This was not about normal basketball tactics. It was about acknowledging that once Jordan was airborne, he was essentially unbeatable. The comment that he's not human reflects the awe and helplessness opponents felt when trying to contain him. This section is vital because it paints Jordan not just as a skilled player, but as an athletic and competitive phenomenon. His hang time, body control, and finishing ability in midair gave him options that no other player could match consistently. Defenders knew that if they allowed him to take off, their chances of stopping him dropped to near zero. This is why they resorted to preemptive physical contact. They were trying to disrupt the moment when his greatest advantage came into play. This point also reinforces the difference in eras. In today's NBA, such contact would often result in a foul call or even a flagrant. But in Jordan's time, it was a survival tactic. Despite this, Jordan still excelled, which amplifies the argument for his greatness. Smith's inclusion of this detail serves to remind audiences that Jordan's edge was not only in skill, but also in a unique combination of athletic gifts and mental toughness that made him unstoppable in the clutch. You could scheme against him, you could foul him, you could try to wear him down physically, yet when it mattered most, he still found ways to dominate. This is one of the many reasons Smith believes that even in an all-time debate, Jordan's name remains at the top without question.
Because this brother in isolation would destroy people. He'd rip souls.
Stephen A. Smith's statement here is a clear reminder that Michael Jordan did not just dominate basketball. He redefined the economics of the game and created a model for how players could become global icons. Before Jordan, athletes endorsed shoes, but none had ever turned a sneaker line into a cultural phenomenon that transcended sports. The Air Jordan brand was not just about footwear. It became a symbol of excellence, dominance, and status. Every lifetime deal you see today, whether it is LeBron James with Nike, Steph Curry with Under Armour, or Kevin Durant with Nike, is an echo of the blueprint Jordan laid down decades ago. Without Jordan's success, the concept of a billion-dollar athlete tied to a brand might not even exist. LeBron's lifetime deal may be massive, but it was possible only because Jordan proved that the combination of elite performance and unmatched charisma could turn a player into a brand powerhouse. Steph Curry's sneaker empire, Durant's marketing reach, these are the children of Jordan's innovation. Stephen A. is essentially saying that Jordan didn't just dominate in his own time, he created an entire business model that today's stars are cashing in on. Jordan showed that the athlete could be more than an athlete. He could be a global mogul. And the crucial difference? Jordan did it in an era without social media, without YouTube highlights going viral in minutes, without the constant marketing machinery of the internet. He built his empire the hard way, through dominance, mystique, and winning. This is why Stephen A. keeps hammering home that Jordan's impact is still visible today. LeBron and the others are just continuing on a road Jordan paved, and no matter how much money they make from these deals, the fact remains. It all started with the man who made a shoe worth lining up for at midnight. Jordan's shadow looms over every sneaker launch, every athlete brand, and every modern sports marketing deal. Without Michael Jordan, the economic empire of modern NBA superstars would be unrecognizable.
They talked about we don't know what he is. I love when John Sally said when they were taping The Last Dance and stuff, and they had a line in there. He said the rule was get him before he gets airborne, because you know he's not human, right? You know he's not human. You know what I'm saying?
This statistic might sound like just another achievement, but when you break it down, it is staggering. Dropping 40 points in an NBA game is a feat for any player, regardless of age. Doing it at 40 years old, when most athletes are long retired or barely hanging on, is the mark of a once-in-a-lifetime competitor. Stephen A. Smith brings up this point to show that Jordan's dominance was not just a product of his prime, it was embedded in his DNA. Even after 2 retirements, even after stepping away from the game for years, Jordan could still come back and torch professional athletes half his age. This wasn't a ceremonial farewell performance. It was a statement that skill, mentality, and competitiveness don't age the way the body does. LeBron James, for all his greatness, is still being managed carefully in his late 30s. He takes rest games, he paces himself for the playoffs, and his minutes are monitored to preserve his body. Jordan, on the other hand, came back after a second retirement. playing in an era with far more physical contact and no load management, and still found a way to dominate at 40. That game was not just about numbers. It was a message to the basketball world that his fire never went out. Even in what was supposed to be a post-prime phase, he could still tap into that killer instinct and take over a game. Stephen A. uses this to emphasize the durability of Jordan's greatness. It was not tied to a particular year or a specific team. It was a permanent part of who he was. And that is why Jordan's legacy is untouchable, because his peak was not a short window. It was a sustained era of excellence that even age could not dim.
LeBron, to me, is top 2 all time. Now, if you disagree, you disagree.
This is one of Stephen A. Smith's boldest and most direct shots in the Jordan versus LeBron debate. By calling LeBron an imitator, Stephen A. is pointing out that much of LeBron's game, style, and even career approach has been influenced by those who came before him. Most notably, Michael Jordan. LeBron is a phenomenal player in his own right, but he did not invent the mold of the dominant, marketable, all-around superstar. That mold was created by Jordan. From the way LeBron approaches endorsements to the way he builds his brand, the Jordan influence is everywhere. Even on the court, you can see traces of Jordan in the fadeaways, the post-up footwork, and the emphasis on mental warfare with opponents. The difference, as Stephen A. sees it, is that Jordan was the original. The man who didn't need a blueprint because he was writing it himself. LeBron has benefited from that template, refining and expanding it, but never truly surpassing it. This is not to diminish LeBron's greatness. It's to highlight that being the originator carries a different weight. Jordan had no one to copy. He had to invent the standard that others now follow. In Stephen A.'s view, LeBron's greatness exists in a world that Jordan created. And that is the ultimate reason LeBron can never claim the throne outright. The man who writes the story will always stand above the man who reads it, no matter how well the latter performs.
Visual in the history of the sport invented by James A. Naismith, who had one patented move that was never duplicated nor ever stopped. That's Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and I have LeBron ahead of him.
Section 10, quote, Michael Jordan is the standard by which greatness is measured. Michael Jordan is not just a name in the history books. He is the measuring stick, the gold standard, the ruler that every other great player gets compared against. When someone says Jordan is the standard by which greatness is measured, it is not an exaggeration. It is a reality that has been forged through years of dominance, perfection, and unshakable mental fortitude. Jordan's 6 championships without a single finals loss are not just trophies on a shelf. They are proof that when the brightest lights were on and the stakes were at their highest, no one could match him. His 10 scoring titles, his Defensive Player of the Year award, his 5 MVPs, and his endless highlight reel of moments under pressure form a resume that defines basketball greatness. LeBron James has achieved incredible things in his career, but when you compare them to the standard Jordan set, the conversation ends quickly. Greatness is not only about numbers, it is about the aura, the intimidation, the fear that struck opponents before the game even began. Jordan had that. He broke the will of entire franchises. He made Hall of Famers feel helpless. The standard he set forces everyone else, including LeBron, to chase shadows they can never fully catch. That is why when people debate the GOAT, Jordan's name is not just first. It is the benchmark that defines the discussion.
And remember, we keep acting like he retired at baseball. No, he retired after his father died. His father died, and he wanted to leave the game.
History is written in ink, not in pencil. No amount of highlight packages, advanced stats, or selective comparisons can erase what Michael Jordan did or elevate LeBron James above him in the GOAT conversation. This quote speaks directly to the recent wave of revisionist history, where fans and analysts try to bend narratives in LeBron's favor. They focus on longevity without acknowledging perfection. They inflate his finals appearances without mentioning the losses. They praise his all-around game without admitting Jordan excelled in every area as well. The truth is, Jordan's impact on the game is cemented. He played in an era with brutal defense, without the luxury of load management, and he dominated year after year. His will to win was so overpowering that it crushed opponents mentally before a ball was even tipped. LeBron, for all his gifts, has never had that same fear factor. He is respected, admired, even loved by some fans, but Jordan was feared and revered by everyone. You cannot rewrite the fact that Jordan never lost in the finals. You cannot rewrite the fact that he had 2 separate three-peats. You cannot rewrite the fact that he made basketball a global phenomenon. History is already written, and no matter how much people try to twist it, it will always show that Jordan stands above LeBron.
Whoa, I don't know that.
I believe. Okay,
I don't know that. That's speculative.
None of us.
Dominance is not just about winning. It is about controlling every aspect of the game so completely that opponents feel powerless. That is what Michael Jordan did for over a decade. The word unmatched is not thrown around lightly here. Jordan's dominance was total, both statistically and psychologically. He led the league in scoring year after year while locking down elite players on the other end of the floor. He dictated the tempo, the energy, and the outcome of games simply by being on the court. LeBron has had dominant seasons, but they have come with cracks in the armor, losses in the finals, seasons where he fell short despite stacked rosters, and moments where the pressure seemed to weigh him down. Jordan never let those cracks show. He thrived on the biggest stages and never flinched. His opponents were not just beaten, they were broken. That level of dominance has never been duplicated, and that is why, even in an era full of talented stars, Jordan remains untouchable. Period. There is no asterisk, no footnote, no condition. Jordan's dominance belongs in its own category, and everyone else, including LeBron, lives in the shadow of it.
Planet that would ever look at Jordan and say that. There's no one that would look at him and say he could never be a three-point shooter.
When you step back and look at the careers of Michael Jordan and LeBron James side by side, the truth becomes unavoidable. LeBron is one of the greatest to ever play, but Michael Jordan exists on another level entirely. He is the standard. He is the history. He is the unmatched force that defines what dominance looks like. You can stack LeBron's stats, his longevity, his versatility, and it still falls short when compared to Jordan's perfect finals record, his killer instinct, and his unshakable mental edge. The GOAT debate will never truly die because it fuels endless passion in basketball fans, but those who know the game, those who watch both men in their primes, understand the truth. Michael Jordan is not just the greatest player of all time, he is the embodiment of basketball greatness. The debate is not about who is better. It is about how far behind LeBron is in a race that Jordan already finished as the undisputed champion.